Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our last WLRT for a long session. It actually has gone, for me anyway, pretty quickly. I'm going to drop in the chat the folder. Our issue group leaders have put a ton of wonderful information in there. And so you can access it. There probably will be more information, so kind of keep that handy because obviously we'll know by Friday at midnight what has and has not been vetoed, which is going to be interesting. And then we have the whole budget mess. And then you will see that Carolyn Kaywood has already dropped in there the 2025 continuance bills. These are bills that they're carrying over to 25 for any number of reasons. They will have to be acted on by November 18th. Many of those bills are bills that we strongly support, so we will be keeping an eye on them. All the issue group leaders will be eventually doing a continuance list so that we can keep our eyes on them. So I just want to draw that to your attention. We're not going to have questions after every speaker. We've got 7 speakers and 30 minutes, 60 minutes. So they're going to be like 8 minutes apiece. Put your questions in the chat. Yes, Carolyn is amazing. I agree with you, Chris. We know where these people live. So we will be, if we can't get to your questions by the end of the hour, you know we're going to find them, get the questions and get them answered, and then we'll send them out. So let's just get through everybody. So with that, I am going to start off with Lisa Koteen-Gerchik, who is the co-chair with Janet Boyd of the Voting and Elections Group. So Lisa, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Let's start with a roundup of the top line bills related to voting and elections. And I'll use the League's priorities for voting and elections bills as a framework. First, we have the right to vote proposed constitutional amendments. The leadership in the majority party decided to delay consideration of these bills until 2025, technically called continuing the bills. These bills will be taken up next year. Another of our priorities is the national popular vote, and there was a bill, but it died in committee early on. Campaign finance is at the top of our list. As you know, Virginia has one of the least restrictive campaign finance regimes in the country. Once again, the General Assembly rejected almost every bill that would have reformed Virginia's campaign finance rules. More details, including bill numbers, that can be found in the handout that the Voting and Elections Issues Group prepared for this WLRT. So you can find them in the drive. We will be developing strategies for campaign finance reform issues addressed in bills that were continued to 2025, including limits on personal use of campaign finance funds and additional disclosure of those who finance certain candidate and independent expenditure advertising. A couple of improved campaign finance reporting rules are on the calendar for final approval. We expect those to be forwarded to the governor. Those pieces of legislation would, 1, impose new electronic filing requirements, and 2, establish a new penalty review process for late filing of campaign finance reports. As for ranked choice voting, we expect final approval today of a bill that would update rules and processes for conducting elections using ranked choice voting, also called RCV. Additionally, we will be developing strategies on 2 bills that were continued to 2025, which would expand RCV to all local offices and presidential primaries. Particularly for legislation expanding RCV to local races, the 2025 session will occur after Arlington County has held 2 more elections using RCV to elect a county board member, if that RCV law is enacted. Showing that RCV can be used successfully should boost confidence statewide. And when I talk about the RCV rule being enacted, I mean the new processes for how to conduct a ranked choice voting election. Several voter access bills have passed. Legislation requiring Virginia to rejoin the interstate consortium called ERIC has been sent to the governor for action on an expedited basis. Last year, for partisan reasons, the governor withdrew Virginia from ERIC, which is the most secure and a highly accurate tool for keeping the state's list of registered voters up to date and clean. If the governor vetoes the legislation, there is fallback legislation that would impose some of the stricter data matching requirements among states, matching data that Virginia lost when it left ERIC. Now we have to expect vetoes of at least some of the bills that have passed both houses. But under legislation that passed handily, people with disabilities other than physical disabilities will now be able to vote outside the polling place on election day, known as curbside voting. We also have bills to set minimum standards for the number and location of satellite voting sites during early voting, and to give voters better notice when a polling place is changed. Next, we worked with the patron on a bill to protect election officials at the local and state level, including allowing both current and former officials to choose not to have their home addresses listed on the voter rolls, and to increase the penalties for threats, harassment, and other offenses specifically against election officials. That bill should be passed by the General Assembly today. We're getting into the weeds of the budget, as Joan was just mentioning, where there is a proposed amendment for this fiscal year to reallocate federal funds to provide electronic poll books for the few localities that still don't have them, and for ballot on demand printers for early voting to any locality that wants to have one, or have those printers. A shout out to Joan, who discovered those funds should have been used for elections. She shed the light and a couple of legislators picked up on it. Another shout out to Janet Boyd for digging into that obscure maze called the state budget. As you heard, a number of key bills have been continued to 2025. Other than the constitutional amendment legislation that was intentionally carried over, the normal expectation is that any bill that is continued to 2025 will in fact not see the light of day next year. But we are considering a grassroots campaign to get the committees to revive a few important ones. And there is a provision for that by November 18th, they should do that, including key bills on election administration, as well as campaign finance reform and ranked choice voting. Stay tuned, and thank you all.
Thank you, Lisa. That was great. And your group, we thank you all for your work. Our next speaker is Alice Dusignan, who is the chair of the Affordable Housing Issue Group. Alice?
Yep, I was just excuse me, I was just unmuting myself. Good morning, everyone. There were a lot of bills related to housing this session, both budget amendments and just regular bills on tenant protections, etc. Our committee focused on 5 or 6, including 3 budget amendments and 2 bills, but again, there are many more than that. So the budget, in terms of the budget amendments, let me go over that first. There was a budget amendment proposing to add another 75 million per year in the biennium to the Virginia Housing Trust Fund. And what happened with that is that in the House budget, set an extra 37.5 million for the biennium was put into their budget. No money was put into the Senate budget. So we're hoping, yes.
Your computer glitched. Can you go back like 2 sentences? There was a loss of the money.
Oh, okay. All right.
Thanks.
So, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're perfect. It just glitched for 1 second. So there's
Okay.
a number we missed.
Yeah, so the budget amendment was to put in 75 million a year, and the House budget included 37.5 million for the 2 years of the biennium, and there was no money included in the Senate budget. So we're hoping that some money, additional money, gets put into the Virginia Housing Trust Fund. The second budget amendment was the 5,000 families proposal, a brand new pilot to actually give rental subsidies to very low income families with children. No money was put into either budget for that program, unfortunately. So that's dead at this point. And then the third budget amendment was to put in 20 million for a new home ownership initiative for very low income families, primarily administered through habitat organizations around the state. And 5 million was included in the House budget, no money in the Senate budget, but that 5 million, they said not to take it out of general funds, but to take it out of Reggie funds. There's still a lot of Reggie funds available at the state level. And they said to take it out of that. So one thing that was added into the bill was that all the homes where down payment assistance is given need to be Energy Star homes. So I think that kind of balanced. So those were the budget amendments. Then the two bills that we were really following and supporting were to extend the pay to quit time period from 5 days to 14 days. That passed both houses. And, you know, we'll see whether or not the governor, you know, vetoes it or lets it go. I don't think there was any bipartisan support for that bill, but at any rate, it did pass. And then the second bill was related to manufactured home parks, mobile home parks, where that are being sold to investors, and then the lot rentals are being increased. I don't know if you all know this, but actually mobile homes are the most unsubsidized affordable housing supply in the entire nation. So we want to keep those mobile home parks as you know, affordable housing. So that what this bill would do is it would require that if an owner is going to sell the park, that they give the tenants 90 days notice, and then give it also to the locality so that it can be purchased by the locality, who then can either keep it and run it or sell it to a nonprofit, most likely. Well, that bill did pass both houses. However, they changed it so that it's only applicable in Planning District 8, which is mainly Northern Virginia, like Prince William, Loudoun, that sort of area. And it's because there was a lot of opposition from the I think it was the home builders for some reason. But at any rate, in the Manufactured Housing Association. But so it's a sort of a pilot now in that planning district. So we'll see if that passes. I mean, it did pass, but see if the governor does sign that bill. And interestingly enough, I think there were 1 or 2 Republicans that voted in favor of that, as well as the Democrats. So that's it. There are a lot of other you know, bills and budget amendments, but those are the ones that were really the committee was focused on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Bill numbers might be in the drive. Check the drive.
They are, for
Okay.
mine anyway.
Okay, if not, we'll fill them in. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Alice. Next, our advocacy chair, Denise Harrington, is speaking on behalf of the Education Issue Group. Denise?
Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right, so you can see that now, right?
All good.
Okay, good. So, when we began this session, hello, everybody. I love the league because we understand that public education is essential to a democracy. We had the study from Carol Nagel in 2017, 2018, and then we had this fantabulous study from chaired by Mary Jennings and Beth Obenshane about education equity. Well, that seemed to be the theme for the entire General Assembly this year. First, we had the JLARC report, which stands for Joint Legislative Audit Review. And of course, that's a bipartisan group. When they do their research, they've always been respected. And so basically it said what our education equity people had already said, Virginia's not funding its schools. So since there is a diet now for fully funding public education, there were so many needs that just weren't met, particularly in the area of school construction. And of course, our education equity folks will say, told you so, because that was one of the findings. And we are in a coalition with the largest coalition of public school advocates and parents and PTA, and that's, of course, the Fund Our Schools. So all of us were actively talking to legislators and so on. And then when we started to figure it out that when bills go to the money committees, a lot of times they go there to die. And in one case, we saw something that was unheard of, which was to amend a patron's bill, and the chief patron, didn't even know it was being amended. And so it kind of weakened the bill, and that caused a little bad blood. And then now that's being worked out in conference. So I'm going to focus today on just a few bills. The only thing I forgot was Sam Rasool's omnibus bill. And I will just add that because it's a Google thing. I'll just add that. But I just wanted to go over this stuff right here about, I'm going to minimize this. I just wanted to go over this about, I want you to pay attention to this in the budget. And you see the suggestions and recommendations there coming from the Fund Our Schools, which we are, and it seems as if certain legislators are definitely in our corner. So first I'll mention a little bit about the bills, and then you'll see some bills, and we'll go back to the budget. So right here, Pekarsky, who used to be on the school board in Fairfax, but she's in the Senate and the Education Committee. This is Dolores McQuinn's bill. And this was the bill that went through several revisions. If any of you don't know, in 2020, they passed a bill about education bill about alternative to suspension. Okay, in doing so, they put all these things that people have been doing. I have actually implemented these programs, and other of you probably, if you've been administrators and all that, or familiar with it, positive behavior intervention supports and all this stuff. So that bill is in conference right now. I'm not trying to. Okay, and of course, the wonderful community schools bill. And it was in the House. The champion was LaSharice Aird, and of course, Sam Rasool, who chairs the House Public Education Committee. And so this bill passed and flying colors, and it's also going to have some more money that I'm going to talk about it. And this next bill was very interesting, HJ 67 by Shelley Simons, who is chairing, the House Education Subcommittee. And so this one was, about the school funding formula. And there's several bills about that. And this is her study. So we didn't feel like we needed a study on a study when JLARC clearly said they're not funding, and the current funding formula kind of keeps schools behind, especially any schools all over the Commonwealth, because it wasn't accurate in meeting the needs. So here we have, one of the things with our education equity, and then we talked about the state needing to pay its fair share. And of course, all of us are familiar with the Dillon rule. So we didn't go after, quote, the Dillon rule, but yeah, we did in our own way. There were 6 localities that were petitioning the General Assembly, or both chambers, to allow them to raise revenue not more than 1% tax, and it has to be a referendum on various localities. Every single one of those bills were killed, with the exception of Prince Edward County. And you know that history in Farmville, and Virginia had one of the 5 Supreme Court cases that were used in Brown versus the Board of Topeka, Kansas education. So they enrolled that bill and and I forgot to mention that, but they enrolled the bill into Sam Rasu's omnibus bill. And I'm going to add that to that, which covers a lot of that. But in the meantime, they still passed. Sam Rasu did a separate option for localities to have a sales tax referendum. And then Senator McPike in the Senate was the companion bill, and that still passed. And then some of these bills, we'll get to JLARC right here. And we were sort of like, but these are good bills. They're dealing with ratios. And then this whole thing about school-based mental health, especially after the challenging what happened to the 6-year-old shooting a teacher. Everyone was very concerned in general about mental health and wraparound services for kids. So that's your psychologists, guidance counselors, et cetera. And you're going to see that. So here we had 3 people who are pro-education: Fagans, Hernandez, and of course, Van Valkenburg now chairs the Senate Education Committee, and he's a teacher as well. And then we saw these 2, Fagan and Hernandez's bill, just die in appropriations. And then they kept Van Valkenburg's bill alive for a while. And then they sort of passed them all by indefinitely. And they were dealing with student staff ratios, et cetera. But guess what? Now I'm going back to the budget. And you'll see all of this. With student staff ratios dealing and other expenses dealing with English language learners. Support staff, lifting that cap. Teacher staff salary. Finally, getting some movement on that. And then, of course, the wonderful community schools and community builders. And this time, it is going to be, I did not quote the amounts this is being funded. I'm just assuming you all can see that. But this time they allocated, this was a huge step forward, $11.1 million for community schools and community builders. And of course, school construction. And you see there's several budget amendments and line items. The 535 million literacy fund can also be used to help with school construction, but that's not the only thing on school construction. But with that, because I'm going to move on. I'm sorry. I don't want to get into the weeds with policy. Now, this is something we said reverse this, because they had taken the organization or the agency that brought the concept to Virginia, community and schools. Basically, they had just stripped them of $1 million. And so that was the agency also that was used in helping to fund. So we thought their thinking was that since they've put some line item money in there, but then in looking and talking to people with the Fund Our Schools, we said, but keep that in there for other smaller school divisions. Certainly our rural schools divisions are definitely benefiting. Henrico has a couple of urban schools that are doing the community schools concept. If you're not familiar with it, you can go on VEA's website. I just didn't want to get, again, too far in the weeds with that. And so the policy option 5 of JLARC dealing with at-risk add-on, more money and funding for students with disabilities, etc. And a lot of that is in some of these bills too. So I just kind of wanted to give you a little overview, and I will add Sam Rassous's omnibus bill that is extremely comprehensive. And the very last thing that I'm going to say, and I hope all of you will just, jump for joy. One of our biggest issues in the last session was simply this idea of taking money from children and parents in public education and diverting the funds to privatization. And miraculously, all of those bills just died this session early on. We didn't have to fight. People were ready to speak. They just all of a sudden were passed by indefinitely. And that is because the philosophy has changed. So thank you very much. I just wanted to give you a brief overview. And
Okay.
that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise. Our next speaker is the chair of our Behavioral Health and Criminal Justice Issue Group. Denise, can you unshare?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Karen Cayley, who's going to talk about the bills that they are working on. Karen?
Okay. And can you hear me okay? Because sometimes it's bulky.
A little bit muted, but can you boost it a bit?
I'm gonna exit full screen.
Maybe if you just,
Yeah, I've got it up at the top.
all right, well, just speak out. It's a little muted, but I think we're okay.
Okay. And I've got my ticker on to time myself, so don't, if that's bothering you, I'll turn it off. The committee is sort of an odd one for being a combination of two huge fields, of behavioral health and the criminal justice system, obviously. We have pretty much focused on the instances where we feel what's going on in the criminal justice system is most problematic for mental health. And I don't want to assume that everyone is familiar with the criminal justice system. Most of us have kind of avoided it. But I want you to be aware that a very significant proportion of people.
Okay, excuse me. I'm sorry, Karen. I can hear you, but I'm hearing people in chat saying they cannot hear you at all.
Let me try something else. I'm going to take out my.
Okay, why don't we go on to Carolyn and then you can okay, thanks. I didn't realize that because I can hear you, but there's obviously some problems with some people. Okay, and so we will move over to Carolyn Kaywood, who not only does our environmental group, she's also chairing our transparency in government. She's a double duty person. So Carolyn, it's all yours.
Thank you. I have not covering transparency this time.
No, I just had to put a plug in.
And let me see if I can. Denise inspired me.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Those are just the things where you might still be able to take action, though I did put the link for contacting the governor in chat. Our primary environmental priority continues to be membership in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And that is in the budget, in the House budget only. The item number is there. It would put $100 million of revenue into the budget. So if it isn't included, we've got a gaping hole in that budget. In the area of climate, I also 3 other related bills passed and have gone on to the governor. We actually had a really good environmental year for the most part, with one exception. In the area of environmental justice, there are above ground storage tanks all over Virginia that are totally unregulated unless they contain fuel. There was a incident about 15 years ago in Chesapeake, Virginia, where a tank ruptured and flooded a low-income community with millions of gallons of urea. Yeah, that face. So I would really like to see that one passed. But we did get 3 other good environmental justice bills, so that's reassuring. In the matter of data centers, every last bill was continued. So that's something to pressure the legislators about. How long are they going to bow down to big tech? I didn't expect years ago that energy would be such a dominant part of environmental legislation, but here we are, and it is. We got some interesting stuff. A nicely bipartisan bill, Virginia Brownfield and Coal Mining Renewable Energy Grant Fund has passed. Shared solar bills have passed. For reasons I can't imagine, the fund for parking lot solar got continued. I mean, of all things, putting solar panels over parking lots seems to be the most win-win thing you could possibly do. I like to have a little shade on my car. The most infuriating thing, though, of all is that the House Privileges and Elections Committee and the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee both killed the campaign finance reform bill that would have prohibited utility contributions to candidates. So you see how all our issue groups interconnect. There were a bunch of show-offy, grandstanding, anti-electric vehicle bills that all got slapped down. This one would help fund charging stations in more rural areas of Virginia, and it's currently in conference. I was really pleased that I think it was Delegate Lopez came up with a bill to create a recycling development center, which would look for developing markets for recycled materials. The big problem with recycling is that the recycled stuff is no cheaper than virgin stock, and therefore there's no real motivation to use it. They continued a bill that would have, it was a Consumer Protection Act bill that would have made the labeling on recycled things much clearer, because lots of things are labeled that they can be recycled that cannot. There were a number of water quality bills. They passed one to study PFAS and another to study groundwater, but they continued one to study microplastics in the water supply, and continued protection for non-tidal wetlands. They were happy to save the trees and stomp out invasive species. And that is what I have for you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Karen, do you want to give it a whirl again and see?
Well,
It's-
okay, do you hear me any better now?
Can everyone hear Karen?
Oh, okay,
Okay, good. Take
thanks.
it away.
Good. So this has to do with mental health and the criminal justice system. And as you can imagine, there's a very significant proportion of people in the criminal justice system at all stages of it who have significant mental health problems. It's actually rather real to say that many of the largest mental health facilities are prisons. Of course, the degree of help that's provided in a prison setting is very, very short of ideal. So the notion of early intervention of the kids, like in school and so forth, is the way to go. I'm going to talk about the 3 fields that were initially adopted to be our priority focus. One has to do, and this is a big one, with having genuine external oversight of the Department of Corrections. It's been a good old boys institution for years. You just watch the language they use year after year in legislation, and they just swap terminology and so forth, and it's high time. The issue is going to be, well, there is a proposal, and it would be within the Office of the Inspector General, which would have good, strong ability to do spot checks, to insist on reports, you know, all that kind of thing. The issue then is whether we can actually get the money to implement all this. The governor's budget budgeted $250,000 for this. The finance committees come back with estimates from a multitude of the jurisdictions saying it's closer to 8 million. So that's going to be a real issue, and that's unresolved. Related to that, though, let's see. Okay. The second issue that we were really watching had to do with trying to reduce the amount of solitary confinement in prisons. There was some progress last year. This year, there was an effort to, you know, expand it and strengthen it a little bit. The main debate that went on had to do with whether it was making allowance for some genuine situations, like people who need protective custody within the justice system, or then there are those who are just so out of it that they're constantly getting into explosive behavior and so forth and get thrown back in. So was the limit going to be 15 days with per incident, or a limit of 15 consecutive days in solitary confinement across a 90-day period? Or was it going to be per incident? Because, you know, somebody could come out half crazed and just get thrown right back in. That is not yet clear. There are very few bills that have actually been adopted on that issue. Senate Bill 719 by Bagby got adopted, but that's also looking at a potential cost of about 8 million. If it's not funded, not much is going to happen. There was an interest in what we call second look. The notion is that in the late 1990s and 80s, there was a philosophy across the country that said throw the book at the offender. And that included young offenders. One of those bills, Senate Bill 449 by Marsden, did add a little wrinkle that says you can count the time that was spent in juvie when you're adding up whether they have reached the minimum number of years that can be, that's a requirement for the parole office to even consider the issue. It's still at 20 years minimum. There was a look at whether a person who is confronted by a police officer or someone in the jail system or whatever, who's really mentally out of it and assaults, and by the way, assault in this instance can include brushing up against the officer or whatever, whether that should be really taken seriously. There was some progress on that. Let's see. But the one that's closest to maybe getting somewhere is in conference. And when you look at the attachment, you'll see that I've listed the 6 people who have been identified as being in that conference committee. That would be Senate Bill 357. I guess, oh, the one other one I'd like to mention is about use of dogs in the prisons. Turns out that according to the juvenile section of criminal justice, they don't use dogs, period. Well, it's been in an adopted bill that they can't. What's more problematic is their use in the for adults, in the prisons for adults. Of the roughly 900 instances documented across the United States of dog injuries in prisons, something like 90% of them were in Virginia prisons. So there really is an issue there. The bill that got adopted does put some restrictions on when you can use dogs for control. There's not an issue about using them to sniff out substances. That's pretty, oh, the one other thing I wanted to close with is that throughout a lot of this is the notion of use of restorative justice. Let's see, an earlier report was talking about using positive intervention in the schools. It's kind of an extension of that. I would like to see our committee look into that much more next year.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Speaking for the Reproductive Rights Issue Group, we have Sarah Dalton up next. Sarah?
Good morning. We have mostly good news from the repo health legislation so far. All of our major bills, except one that we were supporting, seem to be going through the General Assembly. And equally important, all of the major bad bills we spoke against were defeated. And so I'll just give you a brief summary of some of the good bills that passed. I'll share this information by companion bills. Senate Bill 15 and House Bill 1539 protect those who receive or assist in reproductive health care services that are legal in Virginia. So this protects people from extradition if they come in from another state, which is happening a lot because of the laws in the surrounding states. And there was that incorporated another bill too into that. So there were 3 bills involved in that. The next would be Senate Bill 16 and House Bill 78. And these bills protect menstrual health data. There's no reason the government needs our menstrual health data. So those bills have passed. The third grouping would be Senate Bill 237 and House Bill 609, which established the right to obtain contraception. And that's pretty basic. And then Senate Bill 238 and House Bill 819 deal with health insurance coverage for contraceptive drugs and devices. And that bill has already been sent, 238, Senate Bill 238 has already been sent to the governor, and he has until Friday to take action. So I'm really carefully watching that, wondering what's going to happen. But basically that bill requires health insurance carriers to cover contraceptive devices and materials without a copay if they have an equivalent that they can use a copay for, charge a copay, but they have to have one that they cannot charge a copay that's equivalent unless the healthcare provider recommends a specific one, in which case that one has to be offered without a copay or fee. And the third grouping has to do with protection for doctors who perform legal abortions in Virginia. And that bill has passed, Senate Bill 716 and House Bill 519. So it looks like all those bills are going through. The one bill that was continued, that we were supporting, that was continued to 2025 is the Virginia Abortion Care and Gender Affirming Healthcare Protection Act. And it seems that the gender affirming part was what threw them for a loop, and it didn't go through. And of course, the constitutional amendment, which is extremely important, was intentionally continued to 2025. So that's something that we'll be supporting. That's the fundamental right to reproductive freedom. House Joint Resolution 1 and Senate Joint Resolution 1. There were some really, in our opinion, bad bills that were before the General Assembly, and fortunately, all 5 of those were defeated fairly easily. They had to do with prohibiting the use of public funds for abortion. That one actually went to the House so they could have a lengthy discussion on that. But the other bills pretty much died, just they were left in committee. And they had to do with specifications about if a infant is born alive during an abortion, what they had to do, and also abortion based on sex and ethnicity of unborn child prohibited, killing the fetus of another, and abortion prohibited except for saving the life of the mother. So those were all bills that we voted, that we did not support and we spoke against, and we're happy that they all failed. So we're pretty optimistic. Now we have to wait and see what the governor is going to do. Our bills got through, so we'll find out. That's it.
Thank you, Sarah. It's never a dull moment, is it?
No.
And the chair of our gun violence protection issue group, Jeannie Hanowich, is trying to fill us in on what they've been doing. Thanks, Jeannie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm going to try to share my screen here so everybody can look at, can you see that?
Perfect.
I'm going to start off by what's highlighted in yellow. As a lot of us know, the Democratic majority has decided to send some pieces of legislation to the governor on a 1-week timeline, and he has till this Friday to decide what he's going to do. And the first one is very important to me because I have a child that is still in public school. He goes to high school. And it's Senate Bill 225, House Bill 498 with the patrons of Pekarsky and Cohen. And it requires all school boards in the state of Virginia to provide parental notification that it is their responsibility to safely store their firearms in their school. And you know, a lot of us all know about what happened in Newport News with the little boy that brought his gun to school. And his mother insisted initially that the gun was stored safely, and it was not. They found out later it was in a purse on a nightstand. And this is really important because my son, they had an incident just a few weeks ago where a student brought a gun to school. And fortunately, no one was threatened, but the gun was confiscated and the student was taken by law enforcement away from the school. And we got a call from the school basically saying, parents, please remind your children that they're not allowed to bring weapons of any kind to school. You know, it's really should be on the parents to keep their firearms away from their children so they don't have access to bring them to school. So that's a huge issue. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with the governor by Friday. And the other one is that's going to the governor for March 8th deadline is a red flag law. It's basically it's Senate Bill 47, HB 46 by Senator Favola and Foy. It's a firearms transfer to another person from a prohibited person. This is a red flag law where basically if you are found to be a threat to yourself or others, before it didn't specify, and you could just give your guns to someone else in the same household as you and they could be 18. So this is increasing the age and they can't be in your household. And also it has new rules on how to surrender it, because before you could surrender your firearms to someone, but you didn't have to give any information, like who you gave it to, their address, anything. So it's a lot more specific. So those are both things. And we have partnered with the other gun violence prevention advocacy groups in Michigan Virginia. Sorry, I'm from Michigan. Moms Demand Action and Virginia Center for Public Safety. And they're urging everyone to call the governor's office to sign all the gun violence prevention legislation, the ones that are due for Friday and these other ones. I'm just going to go over briefly because I know we're getting towards the end. We have the assault weapons ban by Creed Deeds and Dan Helmer. We have secure storage legislation. There's multiple secure storage legislation, especially to deal with when you have a minor in your home, that you need to keep your gun securely stored and not accessible to minors. The ghost gun, let's see here. All of these bills passed on a partisan level. The only one that passed with any bipartisan, large bipartisan agreement was the firearm alterations, the auto sears, which are basically an auto sear is a very inexpensive piece of that you put in your gun that modifies it to make it like a machine gun. So that was the only legislation that there was bipartisan agreement. Let's see here. So then we also have prohibited areas. That's weapons in mental health facilities. That's not just guns. That's all sorts of weapons, knives, explosives. Then we had some waiting period bills with Delegate Cliff Hayes. We had a mass shooting in, I believe it was right around Thanksgiving, November of 2022 in Chesapeake at a Walmart. And that's, he bought the gun that morning and he committed his mass shooting that evening. So it's to try to, prevent those kind of, unfortunate events and also suicide. Let's see here. Under the red flag law, there's also a boyfriend loophole that they're trying to close. In the legislation that we have now, it's basically someone you either live with, have a child with, or are married to. And we also know that there's also threats to people that are in a dating relationship. And that's by Delegate McClure. And then I don't have them all listed, but we do have there's other studies and money for preventative things. And, we're very hopeful that the governor will sign some of the gun violence prevention. We don't really know what's going to happen. I think it's an interesting strategy that they're trying to see what the governor will sign and by this Friday to see if they can work with him. So I don't know. I'm very hopeful. We didn't get anything passed last year because we had a divided House and Senate, but I'm very hopeful, and it'll put the governor on the record of what he supports and what he doesn't as far as safety. So that's all I have. I'm gonna stop sharing. And this is in the Google Drive too.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks
You're
to
welcome.
everybody here. As you could tell, our issue groups do tremendous amount of work and following legislation. And, I wish we were in person so we could all give them a round of applause, but you could do that virtually because it's really yeoman's work that these people do with, very short periods of time that we have. If you are interested in joining an issue group, I'm going to put that in there. We always can use new people. We need all your brains. Also, if you have missed any of our WLRTs, they are all on our snazzy website, and I hope that you will not only do that. This will go up probably tomorrow. They're all up on YouTube and they are all on the website. So if you've missed any, you can go back there. I do hope that you do look at our website. It's got a ton of information. If you're managing a local league, there's a bunch of stuff under league management. The advocacy page is full. So, if you want to go down a fun rabbit hole, go down our rabbit hole. We do have 5 whole minutes. I think we've answered all the questions in the chat. But does anyone have anything else question wise? If not, we'll just end 5 minutes early and go out and play in the, oh, it's not sunny out. Go out and play in the rain.
Can I just say that there's a form on the website to contact the governor?
Yes, it's in chat.
Just because it's passed the legislature, we're not done yet.
Yes, and that's in the issue group. I put it in there to go and check our alerts, our advocacy alerts. It's the third one down. We didn't have anyone here today, Pat, for childcare. They couldn't make it, so that we'll put information in the drive. So again, thank you to our issue groups. Thank you to all of you who respond to the advocacy alerts.
Joan, can I just say one thing in reference to
Sure.
childcare? Just one quick thing.
Excuse me.
A lot of the folks who participated in that study, they got a lot of the stuff that they advocated for. Hernandez put in the child tax credit, all that passed, and then the Delegate Gardner did almost like an omnibus child care bill. They killed some other bills to make sure that her child care support, and it is all the areas that the child care issue group was dealing with. That's all I want to say. Little one word. That's it.
Sure.
That's
And we were going to get stuff and put it in the drive from them. So, all right, guys, thank you all. And I'm sure we'll be seeing each other. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.